how can I help someone get unstuck? That's how I've always viewed myself as a therapist. So hearing polyvagal theory and realizing that they're just stuck down their polyvagal ladder in more of a defensive state, it's like, oh, that's the language for what I have felt. I've just felt this about my clients. And now that's the language and the paradigm that I didn't have before. So it just fit perfectly into how I saw my clients and the people I work with. So I don't think they're broken. I don't think they need fixing. I don't think they need healing personally. I know it's a very common way to refer to trauma as we're healing from it. And ultimately, if that works for someone, I don't care what word you use, do you? But just as far as how I view my clients, I've never seen someone I feel is broken. I know every single one of my clients has potential to blossom or to grow. They're just not. They're just stuck temporarily. And so how can I, as a therapist, help them to get unstuck?
Have you ever thought about your meaning of life? What is our purpose here? You're listening to CatharSIS, a podcast about the meaning of life, created by two sisters who are in the field of marriage and family therapy. Hello, my name is Michal. And I'm Maayan. This podcast was created in honor of our dad, who was a hematologist-oncologist, a medical doctor who would always ask everyone and anyone, what is the meaning of life? It's a personal yet relatable podcast where we interview people and have discussions about the meaning of life, of course, as well as friendships, relationships, love, nostalgia, how to cope with an existential crisis, and normalizing grief and death. Hello and welcome to another episode of CatharSIS. We have a special guest with us, Justin Sunseri. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And for those who do not know what the Polyvagal Theory is, you're in for a real treat this show. He actually has his own podcast called Stuck Not Broken, which I found back in my study days. Thank you so much for joining us, Justin.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Do you want to introduce yourself in your own way, and then we'll see who did it better?
I'm Justin Sunseri. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Yeah, I'm in love with the Polyvagal Theory. That's really it. I mean, that's the basic idea.
That's it. Can you first explain Polyvagal Theory to our audience?
Of course. It's the science of connection. It's the science of safety. It's how humans, but all mammals, but focus on humans, I guess, how we connect to each other, how we feel safe with each other, but also how we respond to danger. That's the basic idea. And it gets a lot more complex. I'm happy to go into it if you like.
Please.
Okay.
Don't hold back.
So like with when it comes to trauma, we hear about flight and fight and freeze and fawn and like all these things that happen to start with F. And the polyvagal theory is the first attempt, like the first science that came along attempting to explain like what's really happening, what the correct or better terminology for these things are, and what's happening within especially the autonomic nervous system when we are safe, but also when we're in danger. And it's the science of like, if we can't be safe and connected with each other, then we drop down into our flight energy. So our autonomic nervous system shifts from being prioritized for safety and connection. It shifts for defensive behaviors. So if we can't be safe, we drop down into flight energy. If we can't, sympathetic energy. If we can't run away, we drop further down, what's called the polyvagal ladder. We drop further down into our autonomic hierarchy, into fight energy, fight sympathetic behavior. And if that doesn't work, if we can't run away, if we can't fight, then we drop even further down into what's called the shutdown system. And that's the very bottom of what's called the polyvagal ladder, which is the autonomic hierarchy. So if we can't be safe, we drop down into flight, fight, sympathetic. And if we can't run away, we can't fight, we drop even further down into our shutdown. And each of these autonomic platforms have certain behaviors or skills that are unlocked as we drop down, but we also lose access to things higher up the latter. So if we can't be safe, we drop down into our flight behaviors, we lose access to our social engagement behavior, our social system. So like making gentle eye contact or having what's called vocal prosody, which is like a wider range of voice. We lose access to those things. Like we can't do them. We can't do them anymore, like literally. But we unlock the ability to run away and to get to safety, basically, to treat things as, as if it's a danger rather than play. But as we drop down, we lose access to some stuff. We gain access to other things, and it's all about survival. It's not about choice. The polyvagal theory really cleared that up. These are not conscious choices that people do in response to dangerous situations. They're autonomic. It's things that simply our biology is hardwired to react in certain ways based on external, but also internal cues of safety or danger.
Yeah. It's so helpful to know the science behind how we react or behave under trauma. What drew you to being in love with the polyvagal theory?
There was I work for a local school district, and I work with students. I meet with them not in class, but I pull them out of class and have therapy sessions with them in school. And there was a student that I was meeting with at the time. This was a couple years ago. That I just really wasn't satisfied with how I was, my level of help, I guess, basically. They had a heavy history of trauma, and I was just basically like, we're not making enough progress. I'm not being helpful enough. And so during one of our summers, we don't have the summer off, we keep working, but that's more of a time to like develop curriculum or do some research or get paperwork stuff done. And so I'd used that summer, I think I'd used July, and I said, I'll just start over with when it comes to this trauma stuff. Like there's something that I'm missing out on that I'm not able to help this student with. I'm just not getting it. And I think by that time, I had learned about things, trauma lives in the body. Like there's these basic general ideas out there, but no one explained how or what that means. We just say that it lives in the body or that the brain alters and brain chemical this and that. But I couldn't use any of that. That didn't really help me. And so I was like, let me just start over. And I went on to YouTube like any good scholar would. And I typed in trauma. I just started from bare bones. And I found Peter Levine, who is the creator of somatic experiencing. And my first impression of that was like, this is nonsense. This guy's taking us for a ride. I don't believe it. BS. And I kept watching it because I don't know, something was interesting enough, but I kept watching it and I'm like, no, there's something here and there's some results happening here and I'm just not getting it. And that hooked me into the whole like somatic piece of trauma. And then I kept watching and looking at these interviews and lectures that were being given. And I found Dr. Porges, who created polyvagal theory. And I saw him doing a lecture about polyvagal theory and autonomic hierarchy. And I'm like, that's like, it just spoke to me. It was just like light bulbs. And I just felt like that, like excitement and life just coming alive, like pieces came crashing together. And I'm like, oh, this is what I'm not getting. This is what I'm not understanding. And I spent that month and a lot more after that. But that month I went really heavy into doing the best I could to understand it because it's very dry academic language. And I understood enough of it to be like, I can take this very dry academic language and I can translate it to something that I would understand, my clients would understand, my coworkers, the teachers I work with. I can take this language and develop it further. And I had already started thinking about like a podcast and stuff at that time. And I'm like, I can take this and develop it. And I think so that month I went really heavy into it. And then for months after that, I was still just learning, reading, taking in interviews, just anything I could absorb. I took it in and really fell in love with and became obsessed with getting this stuff down.
It's so valuable what you're providing, being able to take dry material. And it's true. I mean, you post about it on your Instagram, you talk about it on your podcast. You're taking this dry material and you're turning it into very interesting material that anyone can understand. And, I'm curious, for our audience, for the members listening, how does knowing this information help how can it help somebody's life? How can it help them improve connections? How can it help them improve their own life?
It gives, I think Porges would say it gives a narrative. It gives, and Deb Dana also, she's a therapist that took this and wrote a couple of books on it and applies it to therapy. But I think what they would say, and what I would agree with, is that it gives a new narrative. It gives a new story or an understanding of ourselves. That if someone survived something traumatic, that it's not like they're defective. It's not like, I think when you look back on this stuff, it's like, well, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And this gives a whole new framework saying that's just the wrong question. It doesn't apply. It's like, you know what I mean? And that now we can apply this framework and we can see that it wasn't a choice I made. It was my body did what it had to survive the thing or things that it went through. So it gives this whole new framework. And just having that, I think, is extremely judgment free. And when I share this with my clients or the people who contact me after hearing it on the podcast, it's like, it's clarity. There's no judgment. There's no blame. It's actually, it might help actually someone to look at what they went through and how they reacted and say, like, my body's amazing. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And here I am. I'm still alive. I'm probably left with a lot of pain after that because we can get stuck in those defensive states. But I did. I survived. My body did exactly what it was supposed to. So it's a whole new framework that is judgment free and I think and shame free. And I think that's extremely needed when it comes to trauma work.
Yeah. Shame free. Absolutely. And judgment free. I think that's what prevents a lot of people from seeking help after they've been traumatized because of that judgment and shame. So I think that's a really key point to highlight. So you have your own podcast. What motivated you to start that?
It just felt right. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's like I just have to. I wonder if the two of you felt the same thing, but it's like I just have to share this.
Yeah, I felt like we're similar in that sense because my sister and I were always playing the idea like, oh, we need to start a podcast, because as soon as our father passed, it's interesting because all of my sisters and I, we all channeled this grief in a different way. And Michal and I, we needed to just keep my dad alive. And like, it really did come to us through
his memory alive, the connection alive, his legacy alive.
His question of what is the meaning of life. And
wow,
he's not going to be around to ask this again. We're going to ask as many people as we can.
We're going to make sure the waiters still hear this question and random people on the street.
Yeah.
Even, like the parking attendants, even they got those questions.
That's super cool.
Everyone got these questions and it really did feel right. I'm curious, what drew you to the field of marriage and family therapy way before your polyvagal interest?
I was originally an art major and I didn't like doing what the teacher told me to do. And so after a semester, I'm like, I should probably switch majors because this is not going to work out for me. And I was talking to the guidance counselor at my community college I went to after high school. And I was like, what's that thing that people do one-on-one where they talk to each other? And she's like, oh, counseling? I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. Like, it just piqued my interest. It just felt right. If I wasn't going to do art, at the time, I remember in high school, I was really into like subconscious hypnosis. I was really into that. And I like taught myself to hypnotize my friends. And so that kind of interested me. So I think I was pulled in that direction of psychology. I really liked my psychology class in high school. And so, yeah, that's where it came from. It just felt right. And I followed that little interest. I'm really glad I did because here I am.
Yeah.
Did you feel like counseling was something that came natural to you? Is that how you?
I really do, yeah. There's something, I have this, I know a lot of therapists probably say this, but people just like talk to me and like open up to me. And I've had people say like, why am I telling you this?
Yeah.
Where I'm a pretty good listener and it's a skill that I have and I'm pretty judgment free. I have zero, like I just don't judge people. You know what I mean? I don't know. So I think bringing that and being able to hear someone and being curious about what brought them to the place they're at without judgment, I think that works in my advantage as a therapist. When I come into a session, there's just no preconceived notions. I'm genuinely interested in that individual in front of me. Like, I want to know about their life as much as they're willing to tell me. I don't rush them. I don't pressure them. And we get where we need to be, or they need to get where they need to be. So yeah, I think I just had these skills that brought me, that like lend themselves to the field, but a genuine interest in psychology, but also like just constantly being willing to question everything I'm learning. I think, and always be willing to like, it's like I'll hear what I'm taught in like psychology or therapy school. We call it Mercedes, and I call it, she was my co-host. We call it therapy school. Like, there's stuff that I'm learning, and I'm like, okay. And there's things I'll hear about in clinical supervision, and we'll hear about in treatment team, and I'm like, okay, but like, there's more to it. Like, and I always want to know the more to it. So I think that lends itself to being a therapist as well. So I think I brought like a natural inclination and a skill set, and that lack of judgment. There's an individual in front of me, and I'm just excited about that. I still am. I love meeting with my clients and helping them get where they need to be. I'm like, there's something about me where I actually can't stand it when people judge themselves. And I will call somebody out. If they're talking to me, I will interrupt them and say, why are you doing that? And that's not a therapeutic question, but it's like, my co-host Mercedes, we talked about this, and I've caught her a couple times where I hear it and I'm like, why are you doing that? And like, the conversation's over until we can like, until you can stop doing this to yourself. I'm like, I'm done listening to you. That's not therapy. That's just me and my friends. But I have like this impatience for people berating themselves or being hard on themselves. And I think a part of me just like wants to see people be more fully accepting of themselves. And especially with trauma, all the shame and the guilt and the self-judgment. And it's like, I know where it comes from, but that's not you. And so to see someone come out of that, I don't want to say it like that, but to see someone figure out and discover who they are and feel it's for me on my end, it's so rewarding. I love that like blossoming. I really just genuinely, I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. I can feel your passion when you talk about it. It's great.
It's the best. It's like the best thing. Even when people email me or DM me and they say, hey, thank you, and here's how it affected me, I'm just like, just feels nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's rewarding. That's called reaffirmation. that was our dad's meaning of life, reaffirmation.
Oh, okay.
Reaffirmation of self, reaffirmation of other.
No.
What does that mean, reaffirmation?
It's like,
what would he say that is?
It's like self-validation.
Or like affirming your being. Yeah, like validating.
Affirming your being.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right on. I like that. My interest.
Yeah.
Like I exist, kind of like it's. Yeah. People see me.
Yeah. People see me.
Yeah, that's cool.
I exist. I matter.
I think I get that out of the podcast. I think that even though I don't see the people I'm talking to, I love hearing from them and knowing their names and hearing their, like if I get a voice message or a video message, I see them, I hear them, and it's like, oh, there's someone real out there. And they see me in a way or hear me in a way, or they do literally hear me, but I see them or hear them now in my own way. And it is affirming. Like I do exist. Someone out there has now like heard me and reached out to me. So I do think I get that out of the podcast, is that affirmation.
Totally. It's confirmation that you're not just talking to a void, you know?
Yeah.
People are listening and they're also resonating. What you're saying resonates with them.
Super cool.
Yeah. And you're also reaffirming them by connecting with them through your words and your healing.
Yeah.
That's one of the, I think that's some feedback I get is they felt seen, even though it's not therapy, I'm not talking to them, but it's like, oh, I felt like I didn't just learn something, but I felt understood. And that's, I think it's really important no matter where it comes from.
Yeah. How do you believe healing happens?
I don't believe in healing. I'll put it that way. I like playing around with words. So the podcast is called Stuck Not Broken. Yeah. So you're stuck. Not you, but like, well, maybe all of us on some level. Like, I don't view people as broken. I don't view people as needing healing. I've always viewed, even before having the polyvagal language, I've always viewed my clients like as just they're stuck. They can develop. in session, they do. They can open up. I see them change. I see them use, critical thinking or tap into the emotions. I see them connect with their parents. They don't do it outside the session, but they do it in session. So they can. And even though we're given these narratives about brain chemicals and genetics, and I'm like, okay, I get all that, but I see it happening in session. So it's like they can access these things. They can access these connections and attachments, and they can blossom. They're just not, So how can I help someone get unstuck? That's how I've always viewed myself as a therapist. So hearing polyvagal theory and realizing that they're just stuck down their polyvagal ladder in more of a defensive state, it's like, oh, that's the language for what I have felt. I've just felt this about my clients. And now that's the language and the paradigm that I didn't have before. So it just felt and fit perfectly into how I saw my clients and the people I work with. So I don't think they're broken. I don't think they need fixing. I don't think they need healing personally. I know it's a very common way to refer to trauma as we're healing from it. And ultimately, if that works for someone, I don't care what words you use. You do you. But just as far as how I view my clients, I've never seen someone I feel is broken. I know every single one of my clients has potential to blossom or to grow. They're just not. They're just stuck temporarily. And so how can I, as a therapist, help them to get unstuck?
It just goes to show how important language is,
It is.
And I think that's, part of the post-traumatic growth, as it's called. I don't know if you like that terminology.
I'm okay with that.
but it's part of any kind of growth is through education, through having the language to articulate it, the understanding to even realize, oh, it's actually this, and I don't have to spend all that energy, turning on myself. This is actually my body's natural response to an abnormal event. And I mean, when you frame it in that way, it's like, oh, and just as you were saying earlier, it's your body's doing its job, what it's been, evolutionarily primed to do.
I love the way you put that. And that's again, like the words I have in my head, that it's like, it's the normal response to an abnormal event. And with the clients that I've seen, we give them all these diagnoses and, all this behavioral plans and all this stuff. And I'm like, if I live this kid's life, I would probably end up the exact same way. Why are we labeling this? Yeah. Why are we, and I know there's a role for diagnosis and whatnot, but I'm like, how else is this kid supposed to be right now? How else is this adult supposed to have grown up? I wouldn't expect anything but these quote unquote disorders. So I'm like, they're completely normal. They're just stuck in their development.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
And it's really like with kids, I've seen, the way I look at it is that their behaviors are a barometer for the family. It's like, it's never just the kid. It's never, It's not like there's an abnormal kid and the family's quote unquote normal. It's like, no, the kids, they're a barometer. There's always something else going on. So I like what you just said, that, these are, to me, expected reactions, normal reactions to very abnormal situations.
Yeah. I'm curious though. I work with children, right? I work with children as well. I work in school-based settings as well. And
nice.
And I work at another agency with kids 0 to 6 with developmental delays. And, some of my clients, they have grief. And I guess it's the response to the abnormal, quote unquote. But I think that, I don't know, is it abnormal or is this just another way of life? Like, there's this poem called Welcome to Holland, and it's basically a poem about how when you are having a baby, a kid, you have all these plans to go to Italy, but then you land in Holland, and then you're like, oh wait, there's a whole new resume here. There's a whole, like, I have to learn the new language, and you're basically not prepared. And I think the fact of not being prepared for a different type of life can cause grief. And
sure.
So, I mean, what is normal? I mean, that was the first question they asked us in therapy school. My cohort and I also called it therapy school, to be
nice.
I love calling it
but
that.
therapy school is the best. But yeah, how do you explain grief through the polyvagal theory, and not just loss of death, but loss of expectation?
There's someone I want to first recommend. I believe her name is Candace Ossifert Russell. I'm probably got that wrong, but there's a book called Clinical Applications of the Polyvagal Theory. She wrote, it's a collection of essays about polyvagal theory and how it applies to clinical life, nursing, grief, therapy, hospitals, stuff like that. But there's a really, really, really good article there about grief and polyvagal theory. And what I walk away from that with is that there's multiple levels of how somebody reacts to grief. And obviously, not everyone reacts the same way to losing a loved one, right? Mm-hmm. But there's also, in our autonomic hierarchy, there might be times where we're accessing the top of our ladder in our safe and social system when we reflect back on that person and we actually can smile and we can feel that love and that safety and feel like they're with us still, right? That connection. And we're probably accessing the top of our ladder, our safety and social engagement system. If you can smile, like you're probably well anchored in your social engagement system, your safety system. But there's also times where you're angry. You're angry about the person you lost, right? Or you're extremely stressed out and anxious and don't want to believe it. That might fall in more of that flight kind of stuff. The anger, not being willing to accept it, that might be more fight energy. It really depends on the individual. The individual would have to be able to look in and check, what the feeling is about that. But there's also the shutdown system, which is very disconnected and numb and just wants to be alone with the lights off. And I mean, so all of these are normal reactions. And I would assume that the same individual could have all of these different reactions throughout the day. So with polyvagal theory is, how do you take what you're feeling and then it's like the science of what you're feeling, not what to feel. It's not a prescription of how to live or how to feel. It's just, so you take someone who is going through grief or whatever they're going through, and how are you feeling? If you're feeling smiley and safe, then you're in your social engagement system. If you're feeling anxious, that's flight system or flight sympathetic. If you're pissed off, that's the fight sympathetic system. And if you're just numb and in a fog or life is very gray, that's that shutdown.
And then how do you help your clients move through the ladder?
I think the biggest thing, I'll give you two things. One, which is tapping into the safety and social engagement system more and more. And the second one is to be with whatever your feelings are, to be with that energy, to be with those feelings without judgment. Those really go hand in hand, honestly. So I think to come up the ladder, you want to exercise your capacity to go up to the top into the safety and social engagement system, the ventral vagal pathways, the biological pathways. And the way you do that is by being curious about like what brings you to feelings of safety and connection. And what brings you to a place of calm or relaxation or peace. What thing, and that could be, I think it really could be a lot of different things, but also what can we do with our biology to remind ourselves that we're safe? So breathing deeply, but all into the belly, extend the exhale, like let the exhale out slower. That turns on this parasympathetic system, the safety system, it turns it on. So simply slowing your breathing down can help you climb the ladder a little bit. Meditation can, if you can handle that. But you might also feel relaxed by playing with your dog. So it's like what that is to a certain individual. One of my clients said she likes to clean dishes because she likes the way the bubbles feel on her fingers, on her skin. That brought her to the present moment. That's what we're talking about, is what brings you to the present moment. And for me, I like to draw. I still draw, even though I don't do it for a living, and I didn't want to do it for a major. I still draw. Like I was drawing today, and it helps me come to the present moment. Even if I'm way down in my shutdown system, or even if I'm like a fight energy, I can channel that through drawing and tap into my safety system and let that energy kind of come out in a way. So practicing, exercising, going up into your safety, you're exercising it just like you would, you're practicing it just like you would anything else. Like hitting a baseball, you have to practice to be able to do that. So being able to access your safety system, you have to practice that more and more and more, because it's uncomfortable. It's different. If you exist more in a defensive state, coming up to the top of your ladder can feel extremely uncomfortable. It can feel vulnerable, exposed. So you have to practice accessing that little by little. And the other thing is, especially once you have enough of an anchor in your safety system, use being in the present moment to look down into more of that painful stuff a little bit at a time. And so that might mean, if I'm in a good place and I feel safe, I feel like I'm in the present moment, I have people around me maybe that I feel safe with, that we can tap into some of that pain. And maybe that is some grief stuff. But we can tap into that and feel that and still be in the present moment, still be in the safety system. So as long as you have that safety system at the top of the ladder, as long as it's active, then you can tolerate that defensive energy. And it won't get you can tap into that flight, the anxious flight energy, and you won't run out of the room screaming. You'll just be able to feel it. And if you can feel it, that actually helps to discharge it, just by tapping into it and feeling it.
Yeah. You probably know the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah.
Yes.
That's like the number one book I recommend to anyone going through trauma. But now I think I'm going to start recommending polyvagal books because it sounds like it's helpful.
Deb Dana's is the place to start. Well, if you can handle the really dry academic stuff, there's one called, I think it's just called The Polyvagal Theory by Dr. Porges. It is, I still haven't gotten through it. It's way advanced. Yeah. But Deb Dana has one called The Polyvagal Theory in Therapy. It's for therapists, but I think it's good for anybody, honestly, because she has some exercises in there, but also common language about polyvagal theory. She does a really good job as well. Or just go to my blog. Mine's super easy language and it's free. But the blog, the podcast are good places to learn about polyvagal theory.
Yeah. Do you work with family systems or couples, or the question I'm heading towards is, how do you navigate through conflict? How would you help someone navigate?
I like conflict. That's fun. In session? Yeah, that was fun. I love that. When I was in my practicum placement, I was working underneath, I want to say I don't think she was licensed quite yet, but I was working under this woman, and we were doing I was shadowing her. We were doing a family therapy session together, and I could see she was struggling, and she was asking questions that popped into her mind, but she wasn't feeling the energy of the session. She wasn't treating the relationship. She was trying to deal with them as individuals. It was a teen boy and his mom. And she was just like swinging a miss. Like you could see she was struggling to connect. And I remember her looking over at me like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh, I got this. And I thrive on that. I love the disagreements. I love the energy because I have no patience for it. And when I have a teen and their parent doing that, I feel just stop. And I'll ask the teenager, I'm like, what is your parent about to say? And they know exactly what their parent's going to say. And I'll ask the parent, did they get it right? And they go, yeah. I'm like, so let's stop doing that. We've already done this before. We got to do something different. I have you here for 50 minutes. I'm not just going to repeat old behaviors. Let's switch it up and do something different. So I attack those, if I think they can handle it. I attack those points where it's like, obviously just they're on like this rotation. It's a pattern they've already done. Mm-hmm. And I have zero patience for it. And I go right at it. And sometimes if it gets down to it, if they cannot find common ground, I'll find it for them. And I'll say, look, do you care about each other or not? Like I'm very empathetic and I'm very patient, but sometimes I kind of I'll get in there and be like, look, do you care about each other or not? Do you love them? Do you love each other or not? Mom, do you love your child or not? And they're like, yeah, of course I do. Daughter, do you love your mom or not? Of course I do. I'm like, okay, this is where we're going to start. And then I'll build from there. Like it's just like bare bones. And then we build from there. So I think for me, it's when I feel those, and it's so palpable when I feel those back and forth, my biology is like, no, like I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm not taking sides. Just this has to stop right now. And we're going to switch it up. And we have to do something else within our 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
That's a very good approach. Sometimes you have to just cut through the fat, is this working for you? No, it hasn't, right? Let's do something else. I like that.
A lot of times, yeah. A lot of times that's
ideas.
simply what it comes down to. There you go.
Yeah.
But even one-on-one, it just comes down to it. I've been working with adults at nighttime now. I have a few nights per week I'll work with adults. And it's like, okay, you've said this is your goal for the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We're not making progress on this. Do you want to change this or not? Like,
right.
If you want to keep talking about this, we could, but either is this still a goal or not? And if it's not, cool, let's figure out. Or if it is a goal, but we're not making it, okay, what's the obstacle? We can figure this out. You know what I mean? So I think as I can be very patient, super empathetic, but there's also a part of me that's like, all right, we have to do something different here. Or not, that's fine. But if it's that point, I'll tell them, look, I'm probably not the best fit for you. Luckily, this doesn't happen very often at all, but I'll say, like, I'm not going to take someone's payment week after week if they're not willing to change. Like, that's just spinning wheels, and it doesn't appeal to me.
Right.
I like seeing people change.
Yeah, it's about growth.
Yeah.
Stuck, not broken.
There you go.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting because I keep applying a lot of this I work with a lot of my clients are toddlers and they don't have language to communicate how they feel. So it's very frustrating, and it's important to meet the client where they're at, but sometimes you really have to tell parents, like, we're going to need to change. We're going to need to, like, do things differently. And no, I also really like your approach. It's very straightforward, and it's interesting because I think it also, working with toddlers, it's difficult because if the parents are grieving, or it's like you're kind of balancing, you're working with the toddlers, but you're really working with the parents. Like,
totally,
that's what makes or breaks the change in the toddler. And
I agree. Well, I would say that not just toddler, but that extends well into life, I would think.
Yeah.
But definitely for younger kiddos, having the parent, if I have the parent on board even a little bit, change happens a lot faster, and I get results pretty damn quick, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If the parent is on board even a little bit, and if they're willing to, like, come in the room, like, oh, cool, like, we're a huge step ahead. Because there's a lot of kids I work with that I don't have the parent on board at all, and it's a lot more difficult. Change can still happen. It's a lot more difficult if the parent's on board at all. Man, change can happen pretty damn quick.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Parents, our primary caregivers, they're the first people that model behavior for us. But then as we get older and we become adults, then the relationships we have in our lives model the behavior for us. It's so interesting how emotions are so contagious, and we're so, we're all just, like, bouncing off each other and attracting what we are. And it's so fascinating.
And in polyvagal terms, what cues we give off is going to affect somebody else. So if I'm in, like, a flight, let's say I'm in a fight energy and I'm very aggressive and I'm not smiling anymore and I've lost my vocal prosody, and so I might be talking more like this, more flat and monotone, your biology is going to pick up on my danger cues and probably make you, like, pull away, like, back, like, oh, something, just like Justin's not a safe organism anymore. So your organism self is going to, like, pull back. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we directly impact. And likewise, if I'm smiling and I have more vocal prosody, then your biology might be like, okay, Justin's safe. We can hang out with him and talk and smile together. And it'll come to, like, your heartbeat will calm down. Like, your biology will say safe mammal, safe organism. So yeah, we directly impact each other on that level. And I think we repel and attract the right people, but also the wrong people as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we are constantly changing and developing and wanting new things out of people. And I guess I'm thinking about now, like, long-term partnership. Like, that's really hard to make it happen, considering so many things come up in life and we're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing. I think it just requires so much communication. Okay, I guess that leads me to the next question. What do you think is the secret to a lasting partnership or a healthy relationship? Whatever you want to answer.
I think for my wife and I, we've been married 12 years and together at least 20. And our values are, like, we're just super aligned. I mean, very much aligned as far as parenting, jobs, paying off debt or slowly paying off debt. for the most part, like money, like our values are so aligned that I think that's a big part of it. We've also consistently been willing to like communicate with each other, even about difficult stuff. So, this is pretty obvious stuff like communication, values. I don't think there's any magic thing there. I was thinking recently how ridiculous it is, like how people do stay together. It happens. I don't know if it happens as much as it used to, but people do stay together for a long time, And luckily I'm in one of those marriages, and it's, things are going good. But I think the values thing is like such a big part of that we, when it comes down to it, like we just are pretty much on the same page, pretty much. And if we're not, there's probably a couple times where we haven't been. And so what the way I conceptualize this is, if you have 1.5 yeses, that's good enough. The 1.5 yeses would be there's some sort of issue that the two of you are disagreeing on, the partners.
Yeah.
If one partner has a clear yes, the other partner might be no, but they might say, I'm no, but I'm willing to give in, or I'm kind of no. Like that's good enough. 1.5 yeses is agreement. So I think even if it's not 100% agreement, that 1.5 is good enough. So I think even if there's things that like we're not 100% on, there's 1.5 is always there. Like one of us is willing to be like, okay, fine, I'll trust you on this one. We'll just do whatever it is.
Yeah,
I like that. 1.5 yeses. That's a good book title.
it is. And it's so refreshing to hear new content. I like just new information.
I think I have a unique way of looking at things. I don't just take what people tell me. I'm always like, okay, but like I always want to know more. I always have questions about stuff, even just like, like talking about, what's the meaning of life? I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean by meaning? Like, I want to know, I'm not going to give you an answer. Like, I want to know more specifically, what do you mean? So we were sharing the same language.
Right. Exactly.
And then we'll get to, yeah.
Exactly.
And even like, I definitely don't want to get into politics, but even with political things, when you put a claim out there, I'm like, okay, well, I want to know, is your claim supported? So I might go do some research if I feel strongly enough about it.
Yeah. So
that I can figure out the reality of a situation.
So since you brought up meaning of life, so the way that I like to explain it is because what is the meaning of life? It's such a big question. So I like to narrow it down. What is your meaning of life? In other words, if you could look back on your life and identify, some themes, it could be one theme, it could be a couple themes that stick out. I would call those themes of meaning. What stick out for you? And can you allow that to guide your answer to what is your meaning of life?
Yeah, I just have to frame it in my mind. So for me, it's like, what's my self-identified purpose? I would call it purpose. Or if I'm looking back, that's like, what do I appreciate about how I've contributed to the world? Does that sound about about what you're saying?
Yeah, like what fuels you? What gives you purpose?
I think we've talked about, like, just for me personally, I think we've already kind of mentioned it. I really get something out of seeing people blossom. Mm-hmm. I love when I'm working with these teenagers who come from impoverished homes, broken homes, like trauma. I love the moment where they can get to the top of their polyvagal ladder and become more curious about themselves and to tap into what they like are passionate about. Like there's something in there. To talk with that kid about like what they're, or also the adults that I'm working with, like what brings them excitement, because they spend so much of their time in a defensive state down the ladder, and so much of their time just dealing with that and getting through the day, that there is no time or patience or curiosity about, like, what do you have within you that's unique and beautiful that only you can do, So to see people tap into that is so exciting for me. I love that. And I think that I do that outside of therapy as well with my friends, coworkers. Like I said, I have zero patience for their self-judgment. And I love to get in those conversations with those special ones that that get my like, whoa, why are you doing that? So I like that. I love seeing people figure that out and feel that and blossom in that way.
And that's something that has been consistent, would you say, throughout your life?
I think as I discover myself more and more and more, and my own capabilities, what I'm capable of accomplishing, and look back, that's true. As far back as I can remember, when I was a kid and whatnot, probably not. I think just hanging out and playing video games and
Yeah, that makes
playing
sense.
catch with
No,
playing catch with my friends and stuff was
you
probably
weren't
good enough.
interested in growth when you were a kid? What do you mean?
No, this is a good point to highlight. We are constantly changing. We may be constantly changing our meaning of life as we develop through the lifespan.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And then our next question, if you could give one piece of advice or some kind of motto to someone out there who is struggling, what would it be and why?
You're normal. I think that's like, and I don't think we have to define what normal is, quite honestly. I don't know if there is like a good definition for a human being of what normal is. But to me, so it's more about combating their idea that they're somehow defective or abnormal or broken. So like, no, you're normal. That's it. Yeah, you're normal.
Okay, I don't know why, but I'm thinking now. I saw this awful like musical when I was in middle school. I don't know if anyone else saw it. It was supposed to normalize being in middle school, and the song was like a bunch of people on a stage being like, "Am I normal?" And that song has haunted me. It wasn't supposed to, but for some reason it haunted me.
Apparently it did.
I don't know why that that just came into my mind. And like the answer is yes. Yes, you're normal. Yes.
There you go.
I like that.
There you go.
I like that.
Yes, middle schoolers, you're normal.
You are normal. That's a main, piece of our podcast is we want to normalize grief. We want to normalize the hard discussions. We were inspired by our dad. So it's like, no, there's a reason why my auntie and I are passionate about normalizing this stuff, but it's something I know that I've thought about since I was younger, at least since I was a preteen, of like, why can't we talk about this hard stuff? Like, why can't it just be normal to talk about this? Why is there like this, like I'm very tapped into energy, I guess. And so I would be able to feel the energy of like a difficult conversation or like tension in the room. And I'd be like, why is there tension just because of this discussion?
Well, I think talking about death, sex, things that are kind of like, taboo, especially back then, it was hard to engage in conversation. It was hard to normalize. There's just so much research today than there ever was. And we also came from a very old-fashioned family.
Yeah.
Are you finding that with grief that people are having a hard time talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it is come up that it's hard for people to know what to say or know how to be.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
I can see that, yeah.
And it's, it's not their fault. It's no one's fault for not knowing how to be, knowing how to be in grief and knowing how to like talk about these things. I think it's a learned phenomenon. And if it hasn't been learned, then everyone's context really matters in this equation on how they are able to show up.
Yeah. I'm lucky enough to not have lost either of my parents yet, or my in-laws either. I've lost 3 grandparents, and Nani is 99 years old. So
wow,
she's the last one. She's 99. That's pretty awesome, huh?
That's amazing.
Well, family for her. it would be family. She's it's an Italian thing. No, actually, no, that's not. I find that cross-culturally, that's true. That just family is a huge issue or huge. It's a big deal.
Like a huge factor in.
Yeah,
longevity.
That's a cross-cultural. Yeah,
I love that.
And so for her, like love of family, and like it just seeps off of her. Like it's just same with my dad. And so I haven't lost either of my parents. So I've lost aunts, I've lost grandparents. How someone would respond to that, the way I feel about them responding to me saying I've lost a grandparent, I imagine would be different than me saying like my mom passed away.
Yeah.
And what I would want to hear, what I would need to hear, but I don't know what that is. I have no idea. I have no personal reference for that.
Yeah, you don't know until you get there. I mean, that
Right.
was my experience.
So when my papa passed away, my Italian grandfather, we call him Papa, he was in, I think he was in hospice, and the whole family was there. And Italian family, a whole bunch of us were there, right? And he has 4 children, 1 daughter, 3 sons, yeah, and a whole bunch of grandkids, including me, right, and my 2 brothers and all of our cousins. So a whole bunch of us were there in this room, and he's dying. Like we were watching him die, and he was hanging on for quite a while. One of his sons was not there, and then another grandchild, but he was hanging on for quite a while. And we all just said, okay, well, we're going to go. I don't know. I don't remember why, but it was just time for us to go. And he was passing away slowly. And he didn't pass away until his son got there and he got to say goodbye, basically. I don't think he couldn't say it, but he got to hear from the last 2 people that were not quite there yet. But actually, what I wanted to share was, like, so there was that, which I thought was just beautiful. Just like even though he couldn't talk, even though he wasn't giving us any signs, like I truly believe he was just kind of hanging on until they arrived. Those last 2 individuals arrived, and when they did, he passed away with them in the room. Like he just needed them. And yeah, so as we were there, it's an Italian family. We're very loud. Like we yell all the time. We're like close. We hug. We laugh. We smile, like constantly. We joke around, like we don't sit quietly. And so as he's passing away, we're all sitting there quietly. And it was so odd. And it was so abnormal. And I'm like, this is his last moments of life. And we're all sitting here quietly. This is not normal. I don't want him passing away this way. And it was just like we got to have this man in our life. Like we have the privilege of having this individual in our life. Like, what's wrong with tapping into that right now? Like, what's wrong with feeling that stuff and talking about memories? And so I remember all of us were sitting there quietly, and I'm like, I felt super uncomfortable, but I said out loud, I'm like, why don't we just share like positive stuff, memories? Like, why not just be ourselves? And it did. Like, the whole room lightened up. We made dumb jokes and shared funny stories, and it was a huge shift. And it's like, to know that he passed away, hearing his family with all of our love, I mean, so much love. To know that he was dying, hearing that, for me, brought me a lot. And it allowed me to tap into like what I feel for him and my family, which is tons of love. And I'm like, that's how personally I would want to go personally. But it was like, it's okay to feel sad. We can do that, but we also get to celebrate, like, we had this individual in our life. Yeah. We got to experience this love. It's so much love and connection. Like, we got to experience that. Let's tap into that at the same time as being sad, yeah, and saying goodbye. But we have all this beauty, like all this love.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. You really celebrated his life until the very end. That's amazing. That's amazing.
He was cool. He was awesome. You know, he's the patriarch of the Italian family, and the matriarch is still alive, and she's kicking butt still. And you know, I hope we have something when she passes where it's like, it's that bonding, it's the family, it's the love. I mean, how else would you want to go besides that, right?
I love that. Yeah. That's how I want to go. You just gave me an idea.
Okay.
I'm going to instruct everyone. So that's also something that my dad taught me. You know, I'll speak for myself, is he was very matter of fact. He was very matter of fact about death. And he was talking to us about it for the past couple of years, saying like, yeah, you know, it's not up to me if I die. It's not up to any of us. And that was something that he told his cancer patients a lot. They'd be like, am I going to die? Am I going to die? What are the statistics? And he didn't like to say, well, statistics show. He didn't like to tell that, to talk about the statistics with his patients. He would reframe it. He was also very big on hope. He believed that hope was a really good motivator. And one of the things he would tell his patients, he'd be like, I don't know when you're going to die. We're all going to die. And, he's like, it's really a matter of when. And
he would say, like, I don't know, I failed. What did he say?
I failed fortune telling class in medical school.
You would make.
I love that. But that totally, as a therapist, doesn't that fall into what we do? Like, are you both in like treatment teams?
I'm in part of a treatment plan for one of my agencies.
I mean, like, do you talk with you're both therapists, associate?
Yeah, we're both associates.
Do you ever talk to your fellow therapists and you or they give like a prognosis, like, well, we can't help them, or they're just born this way, or it's genetics, or this will be a lifelong condition that they have to manage, stuff like that?
Mm-mm.
They don't say stuff like that?
Mm-mm.
That's why I don't.
I wouldn't.
Not you, but no, your colleagues. Do
I wouldn't be able to work at a place like that.
Oh, that's so.
It sounds like you're the lucky one. You got so bothered and went to Polyvagal Theory for answers.
Yeah. I hear that. I used to hear that stuff. I still do, all the time, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, how could you possibly know that? How could you decide for someone that they need medication management their whole life or behavioral management their whole life? How could we possibly know that? How could we possibly like put that cap on someone's potential? It pisses me off. Yeah. And I'm like, that might be true. Until I've discovered that, or until that becomes true in the future, I'm going to assume that we can do better. At least a little bit, like at least one step better today. We can do one step better, right?
Yeah.
Of course. So can we do one step better the next day? Like, I would never put a cap on someone's potential. It upsets me. Sorry. Well, I'm glad you're not hearing that.
So, like my dad, I really believe in, whether you want to call it placebo effect or growth or, potential or whatever it is, I really believe that you can get through it with mind over matter in many instances. It doesn't mean it's the only therapy. It can be a nice adjunct to chemotherapy or whatever it is. But I mean, I think there's so much that we just don't know. If you're in the therapy room with me, you already made that first step. You don't want to stay stuck.
That makes sense.
Grow.
That makes sense. And I don't think it's just like mind over matter. I don't think it's just placebo. Like when we feel hope, our ventral vagal system is activated, the safety system. If that's activated, our body uses resources for health and growth and restoration. So the more access we have to those pathways, our body does better. I'm not going to say it's going to heal cancer, but I just read a study about mindfulness and the effectiveness on cancer treatment. And those who were practicing mindfulness, I believe, had better outcomes. Those who were able to access the present moment more, be more mindful, they had better outcomes. And it's not just like placebo. It's like you're accessing the biological pathways that are optimizing the resources of the body for health and growth and restoration. That's a Porges phrase, health, growth, and restoration. Yeah. So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. And it's just that I'm going to definitely be introducing Polyvagal Theory into the room with my clients, because I think it's one of the tools that I use is like psychoeducation. And that's just one of the tools that I use so that they can hang their hat on hope, so that they can say, oh, okay, I don't have to go through this journey completely one way like I thought. I can have some control over it.
I would think a benefit there would be to normalize their feelings of the cancer process. Like if they're more of a pissed off fight place, that has a place on the ladder and they can track that. And it's not just like they're having a bad day, or it's not just like, what's wrong with me? Why am I so angry? I should be happy. It's like, no, this is just biology. You're just accessing that fight system. So what? Now we can be with that energy and climb up the ladder. But I think there's, as far as psychoeducation, probably a big role there for like noticing where you're at on the ladder and having a framework for it, rather than like, oh, I'm randomly feeling this way today.
Right.
It's not like that.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Justin, for coming on our show. Where can our listeners find you?
JustinLMFT.com is my website. I have lots of polyvagal resources. There's a podcast. There's the blog. There's downloadable PDFs. And you don't have to give me your email or anything. It's just there. I do have an email list where I send out a free ebook every quarter. It's called Stuck Not Broken Quarterly. That's the email list thing.
So
I
much
have a
free content.
most of it is like I really like helping. I want people to be who they're supposed to be, whatever that means. But just climb their own ladder, blossom, whatever it is, get unstuck. But I do have a course also. It's called Building Safety Anchors, and that's the design there. The intention is to help people to access their safety system, and it's like a 30-day course, and every day there's short doses of learning and or doing. So it's not overwhelming, and it's very targeted, specific things that people do every day for 30 days.
I'll be referring my clients to that.
Thank you so much for being here and for talking with us. It was such a pleasure.
In a world where I'm a drop in the ocean, an Israeli, American, whatever, in France, to be completely happy and satisfied in my environment, all I need is one friend. 2 friends, it's a luxury. Okay, the ultimate friend is the one you open up your soul to, the one you share with, the one who actually gives you the full reaffirmation that you thirst for. Okay, we all do that. Okay, we all have the thirst for reaffirmation.